Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. Today I wanted to do another unit review video, but this time we are going to step away from the Dark Angels and Marines in general and take a look at the very first individual model I ever bought for Warhammer 40k, and that is the Callidus Assassin, which I got for the grand sum of £3 English, which is quite honestly hilarious when you look at it now with its £19 price tag. But anyway, let's dive in and take a look at the datasheet, the rules and abilities for this femme fatale, and then try to decide if she is worth a slot in your Imperial army. At 100 points or 5 power, the Callidus has a decent character light style profile with an above average 7-inch move, weapon and ballistic skill of 2+, strength and toughness of 4, 5 wounds, 5 attacks, leadership 9, and a pitiful 6-up save. It's, aside from the save, a fairly good little profile with a solid number of wounds and attacks, all hitting on that very tasty 2+, and even her save, as we will see in just a moment, isn't really all that much of a detriment, as 99% of the time you won't actually be using it anyway. As an assassin, she has the Agent of the Imperium keyword, which is how you bring these units in your army, essentially allowing you to include one Agent of the Imperium unit in each Imperium patrol, battalion or brigade detachment in your army without taking up a slot. And what's really great is that adding these Agent of the Imperium units doesn't break up detachment abilities such as chapter tactics or other unique rules like combat doctrines. These units obviously don't gain those abilities in any way, but bringing an assassin in a Space Marine army doesn't mean that all of your Marines will suddenly lose all of their juicy combat doctrine and super doctrine abilities, which is a nice little quality of life addition. If you want to bring more of the assassins, or indeed the entire lot of them, they do have the special execution force rule, which lets you bring a unit with this rule, which is all of them, in a Vanguard detachment, even if it doesn't have an HQ in it. So you can slot all 4 assassins into a separate Vanguard detachment, and it acts as your execution force addition, which again is really cool and fluffy, and definitely something you might want to try in a game or two if you are intent on bringing all of the assassins. One of the other shared rules that the assassins have is independent operative, which firstly means that she can never have a warlord trait, which is, kind of understandable. Assassins aren't exactly known for their army leading qualities, so it would be a bit odd if she could take some trait which would buff or improve the rest of your force, but it also gives them the ability to be set up in concealment during deployment and then appearing at the end of your movement phase from turn 2 onward, anywhere 9 inches away from the enemy. It's a really great ability for the assassins and allows them to be pretty sneaky little bastards and make your opponents have to consider where they may show up and cause the most havoc. For the Callidus though, you will 100% of the time never ever use this ability. And that's not because it isn't good for her, it's just that she has a much better version of it that she can make use of. As far as the Callidus herself goes, she has a few very nice special rules which make her a particularly fearsome addition to your force. First up, she has the Lightning Reflexes rule, granting a 4-up invulnerable save, and obviously being the reason that you will pretty much never ever be using her 6-up armor save. And having that ability to pretty much have a 50-50 chance to ignore or shrug off any damage coming through does make her that fair bit more survivable and will give her a little bit of staying power on the table. Like, she's not going to, be able to survive a full-on barrage from your entire opponent's army, but that does give her a little bit more durability on the tabletop. She also has the hit and run ability, allowing her to both shoot and charge in a turn that she fell back, giving her some fantastic mobility around the board, really letting her get into your enemy lines and then harass them before pulling back and then going after another unit further down the field. With her 7-inch move, she can make herself a pretty speedy disruption unit that your enemy absolutely will have to deal with as soon as they can. Polymorphine also allows you to set up your assassin off the board during deployment, but this time she is in disguise. And at the end of your movement phase, again from turn 2 onwards, she can appear on the board, and this time instead of 9 inches away, she can be set up d6 plus 3 inches away from enemy models. And what this means is that best case scenario, she can deploy a mere 4 inches away from the enemy, all but guaranteeing a charge on the turn she appears. Obviously, if you roll a 6, it is still the same 9-inch deployment, and unlike in 8th, this isn't one of the things that you can now choose to use a command point reroll on, so if you do roll a 6 on that d6, you've not gained anything, but it's still much better than independent operative, because assuming average rolling, you should still end up around 6 or 7 inches away from the enemy instead of 9 inches, which does make the chances of making a successful charge on the turn you arrive significantly more likely. Her final unique ability, and quite possibly one of the best abilities in the entire game, is her incredibly strong Reign of Confusion. And what this does is that in the first battle round, even if the Callidus Assassin is hiding and not on the board, then every time your opponent spends a command point, you roll a d6, and on a 4+, they have to spend an extra command point to do that stratagem, which is just an absolutely incredible rule in my opinion. If you consider that quite often in the first turn of the game, there are more than a few armies that really do like to front load their command point usage to make a really devastating alpha strike or get things set up in place for a load of turn 2 charges and that sort of thing. This can, whilst not necessarily stopping them completely, really hinder your opponent's ability to get all of their plans set up and ready to go. Wanting to get some early kills with weapons of the Dark Age, that could well be costing you 3 CP now. Or how about a nice transhuman physiology if you're being shot at by your opponent? That could potentially already be 2 CP on a big unit, but now it could cost you a much more painful 3 CP to get off if you roll that 4 up. And even things like command point rerolls or interrupts, if there is a turn 1 combat somewhere, are affected by this and will really make your opponent have to weigh up their available command points. And although it won't always go off, it is only on a 4+, your opponent will have to consider that it could go off for every single stratagem they use, and it will massively force them to maybe consider either not using any stratagems turn 1 or just go with it and potentially head into turns 2 and 3 with maybe 4 or even 5 command points less than they would normally have. It really can make an incredible difference to your opponent's mid and late game battle plans, and if nothing else, even if nothing goes off on it, it is a huge psychological factor that they will have to contend with throughout the first battle round. As far as the Wargear options go for the Callidus, as you might expect, she is very much a get close and interrupt the enemy battle lines and battle plans kinds of combatant, and so her weapons are all short range or melee focused. She comes with a Neural Shredder, which is an assault 1 weapon with a 9-inch range, hitting on her 2+ ballistic skill, and then on a successful hit you roll 3d6, and if you match or beat the target's leadership characteristic, it suffers d3 mortal wounds. With only 1 shot, it is only a maximum of 3 wounds, which is a shame, but with a 3d6 roll, you should on average beat every single leadership value in the game. The average on 3d6 is 11, and the highest leadership in the game obviously being 10, so it is a pretty reliable way to get a couple of mortal wounds onto an enemy target before you charge in and hopefully finish them off in melee. And for her close combat weapons, she has a phase sword, which swings at strength user, -3 AP and a flat 2 damage, and crucially, invulnerable saves cannot be taken against it, meaning that if you make all of her swings with this weapon, she's going to have 5 attacks, hitting on 2s at strength 4, doing 2 damage, and getting through pretty much most opponents' armor, and then not even letting them fall back to the invulnerable save that most HQs rely on, it really does make her a fantastic unit to charge not only into characters and HQs who quite often have things like Iron Halos or Storm Shields or other forms of invuns, but even units like Terminators and that sort of thing who rely on their invulnerable saves to keep them alive. She also gets an extra swing with her other weapon, which is the Poison Blades, which are strength 2, -1 AP and 1 damage, but always wound your target on a 3+ unless it's a vehicle. It is honestly nowhere near as scary as the Phase Sword, and I would say unless you're up against Orc Boys is the only thing that I can think of where the Poison Blades would actually perform better. Every other situation, you may as well just make all of her attacks with the Phase Sword because it's just straight up better. Now, she isn't the be-all and end-all of melee combatants, and yeeting her into a unit of Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators will end badly for her, but as a lone character killer, perhaps if there's an enemy Farseer or Warlock or Archon, pretty much anything that's strength 4 can have a decent chance of wounding and that relies on a key invuln to keep them alive, she can go in and, assassinate them, which is kind of what she's there for, I suppose. She also has some stratagems which make her even better in her given role, which is to say being a disruption and harassment unit who can go after single HQs and pretty reliably take them out in melee combat. First up, the acrobatic stratagem gives her the ability to advance and charge, so letting her already impressive 7-inch movement potentially go up to 13 inches and then still getting a 2d6 charge off to go after any faraway characters who are trying to escape from you. And on top of that, attacks targeting her suffer a -1 penalty to their hit rolls until the next battle round. It isn't going to keep her alive against really dedicated fire, and despite being a character, these assassins will likely be off on their own around the board, so your enemy absolutely can and will focus them down if they are able to, but the -1 to hit does add just a little bit more durability if the enemy is thinking of taking some random pot shots at her and hoping to get rid of her. But still, even with that, toughness 4, 5 wounds, a 4-up invuln, and -1 to hit isn't exactly all that difficult to kill, so do be careful with your Callidus as you are planning what you want to do with her. Priority Threat Neutralized is a generic assassin stratagem and pretty much grants you a free command point when your assassin kills a character, or 2 command points if it was the enemy warlord. It is fun and fluffy for the assassins, and it is actually quite useful in keeping your command point supply up and running over the course of a game. I will say it's 0 CP, so it's kind of easy to forget about if you're like me and pretty much have a plan for how you're going to spend all of your CP over the course of a game, so do try to remember it, as it could net you a couple of extra uses of a particular stratagem across the course of a battle. Shadow Assignment is another generic assassin stratagem and quite a unique one in that before the battle begins you can use this and for 2 CP essentially swap out one assassin for another. So if you have, say, a Vindicare and then after seeing your enemy's list realize that a Callidus may serve you better, you can use this and then swap out that Vindicare for a Callidus Assassin instead. It is very potent in the right situation, and whilst it won't always be something that you want to spend 2 CP on, it could help you to adjust your force to best suit the army that's facing across from you, so it is a handy tool to have in your back pocket in these circumstances when you may need it. And then finally we have the absolutely fantastic 2 CP stratagem Supreme Deception, and what this does is essentially buff the Reign of Confusion ability that the Callidus brings, allowing you to choose at the start of any battle round after the first to reactivate that Reign of Confusion ability for that round. And it's important to note that this doesn't have to be the second battle round. You could save this till the 3rd or 4th or even 5th battle round where your opponent's CP will already be relatively low, forcing them into some incredibly difficult situations. You know, do they save that last 2 CP for a final interrupt or not bother? Because if you only have 2 CP left and Reign of Confusion goes off and bumps it up to 3, you can't use it, and it says that any CPs spent so far are lost so you will essentially just be throwing away your final command points, or do you need that last minute clutch auto pass morale to stay on an objective and win the game? That may end up costing you 3 CP instead of 2, so you may not be able to do it. It is honestly such a powerful ability, and being able to reactivate it in any turn where it can most benefit you will 100% devastate your opponent's planned out strategies and what they had in mind for their command points. Honestly, I would say that for the Reign of Confusion ability alone, the Callidus is almost worth taking. The fact that she is relatively killy and good at taking out enemy HQs in her own right is a very nice bonus which she can bring to your army, but is she worth the 100 points she'll cost you? I mean, if you have a game and roll no 4+s for Reign of Confusion, obviously not. But on average, I would say if you play her well and plan what you're going to do with her, you can easily cost your opponent a good 5 or even 6 command points over the course of a game, and then potentially kill off some characters or just generally harass their backlines and force them to react to her potentially 4-inch charge from turn 2 onwards. And so from that perspective, I would say yes, she is very much a cerebral type of unit, making your opponent doubt their plans and doubt their deployment, doubt what stratagems they're going to be able to get off in a given turn, and really make them have to 100% sort out things like their screening and their character protection bubbles, because with the Callidus, even a 4-inch gap is all that she potentially needs to get at their valuable HQs and kill them with honestly quite relative ease, thanks to her fantastic weapon skill and 2 damage attacks which ignore their invulnerable saves. So I would say that for 100 points, purely in that disruptive kind of attacking the enemy's battle plans and forcing them to change how they approach the game, she is worth it. Not in every single game, obviously, but certainly in some larger games, I would say she is worth it, because in the larger games where you have more CP, your opponents are going to want to spend a lot more, in turn 1, getting that initial alpha strike down and getting everything set up and spending a lot of their command points. And if you can really punish them in that first turn and then punish them again in a later turn, you can really, quite honestly, cripple their entire battle plan. But what do you think of the Callidus Assassin? Do you think she is worth taking in an Imperium army? And if so, how would you use her if you did bring her along? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I will catch you later, guys.